You're listening to the God Life Culture Podcast, where faith
and what's trending collide. Welcome to the latest episode of the God Life Culture Podcast. This is Eddie.
What's up, everyone? This is Miguel, and we are so excited that you are tuned in for another episode of the God Life Culture Podcast. If this is your first time listening, we want to say welcome to the God Life Culture Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, tuning in, and we hope that you subscribe so you can stay tuned for all of our new episodes and upcoming episodes that we have in the future. If you are a returning listener, thank you for taking this ride with us, and we hope that you are catching up on all our episodes, on those you've missed. We know in the summertime, people are so busy doing all these different things. You may not have the same time or availability to listen to, podcasts or watch podcasts, but you are catching up, and we appreciate you for joining and tuning in today.
Yes.
We have been away
from you guys, and you didn't even realize it.
For about 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
And, for those of you who listen every week or watch every week, there were still episodes, new episodes, because that's how we do.
Professional.
That's how you have to be. You have to plan. You have to plan ahead. So we mass recorded or bulk recorded, right? 3 episodes.
Yes.
We did a reaction video.
We did.
Don't play with us. We did a reaction video, to Naomi Rain's song, World on Fire.
Yes,
so
we did.
If you didn't see that video, you can go back and check that out. But yeah, we talked about what we wish we knew in our 20s.
Yes, we did.
The Skeptic's Guide to Churching. And then last week's episode, the things you don't know about us.
We did.
And we learned that I can cook. I know French.
You do.
And,
I think we watched a different episode than the one.
I have all these games on my phone,
Complete opposite. No,
I can sing.
Well, did you get hit up by anybody trying to give you
I'm actually turning down, requests. So the problems are shifting. It's shifting.
Okay, that's good. But we're supposed to be doing a duet, so you kept that to yourself. So
you said the duet. I never mentioned the duet, but that's okay.
You know what? With that being said, today we're just going to drag people up and down, starting with my co-host, Miguel, who is being shady. But other than that, great. You know what it is. At the end of the day, I'm good. I always say, regardless of whatever the situation may be or whatever may be going on, I always sit up here smiling with each and every one of you guys and just giving that energy that's supposed to be given. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the best that you could do. And, hope that you like it. And if you don't, then I don't know, kind of remedy that within yourself. We like being at
this table.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day,
we like what we do.
Yes, we like what we do. We like what we talk about. And, we like to, give our opinions on stuff, give our observations on stuff, sometimes even give advice that is also applicable to the masses, but to ourselves as well. Yeah. We've never sat here and said that we are experts in any area or that we are excellent in any area. If there are suggestions that we give or advice that we give, it's from our perspective, our point of view, but it also applies for us as well. Those are the things that we're constantly working on as individuals. So at times it may sound like we kind of know everything if that's the way that it comes off, but we really don't. And we're very honest about that. We've been honest about that, from the very beginning. We're just looking to have a great time and talk about things that are happening in the world, things that are happening in culture, experiences that a lot of people can relate on inside, outside of church and all that great stuff.
Yeah, and it's funny because think about it, we have so many people that listen to the podcast. There are those that actually listen on Apple or Spotify or Anchor, right? Then you have the individuals who watch on YouTube, right? And will sit and watch through the whole episode and do that. Then you have the individuals that their only real connection is maybe our reels on Instagram. Yes. So on Instagram, we'll have reels, and those reels are, can range from a minute to a minute and 30 seconds. And there are people that literally listen to our podcast through those reels, and they really won't sit to listen to the full episode, but the way their schedule is or their mind is or the way they like to consume content in short form that way, that's how they listen, right?
That's a really nice way to put that.
And and a lot of times in listening to just a reel, you're just getting a minute and 30 seconds of a topic, right? Or a conversation. You're not getting the full 40-minute conversation, 30-minute conversation that we normally have. So a lot of times it's easy to watch a reel, look at a reel, and then based off of 60 seconds of something that was said or the way someone came across, it can give you a whole different idea as to what the conversation was actually about, what was said after that or before that, the context surrounding that. So I encourage those who just kind of scroll on social media looking at those reels, who may not get the full context, to go back and listen to actually the full context of some of the podcasts. Recently there was someone that, was talking about the podcast and they were saying they were talking about our titles, right? And they had mentioned one of the titles, and they thought based on that title that it was going to be about a specific thing. And I told them, I was like, that's actually not the route we took for that. That was the title. Yeah. But if you actually listen to the episode, we kind of took a different route, obviously based on the title or that topic, but it wasn't what you thought. So, listen.
Yeah, I mean,
actually listen to it.
It is. I think it's definitely important for that, especially when you start having conversations with people in reference to the podcast or the podcast title, or, oh man, did you see that they released an episode that said something like I'm leaving the church, and oh my God, what could that be? I think it's about this. I think about that.
And the title was I'm leaving my church.
I'm leaving my church. Yeah. And it's kind of people may then run with that and create a scenario of these are the things that they're going to be talking about. But then go ahead and then share that narrative with other people, but they never take the time to actually sit there and listen to the episode, because I'm pretty sure you would be, number one, surprised, and number two, blessed and edified by the things that we spoke about.
And that is actually, that episode specifically is one of our most watched episodes on YouTube. A lot of people watched that episode. They came for that episode.
Yes.
I liked it.
Yeah, people come for certain things, and I think that at the end of the day, it is what it is, But I always think that that's also a life lesson that you can apply in your life in general, where maybe you overheard a piece of a conversation because maybe you were just being nosy, or you just found yourself in a place that you should have not been, or you just walked into a room and a conversation was already happening, and you just picked up on a little piece of a conversation, and then you walk away trying to fill in the blanks. You create a whole different narrative that is I'm almost positive has nothing to do with the actual conversation that happened.
Yeah.
But now when you go and you share that with other people, I overheard so-and-so saying this about that person, and I think it has to do with this and whatever. And then that's the narrative that starts going around. And then when you come to find out, we weren't even talking about that. We were talking about a cooking recipe. Right, and I said, I'm going to cut it. And they thought I was talking about a person. And I was talking about the chicken. It's it is that happens a lot as well. So it's kind of those are the things that, there's social etiquette that you're supposed to have. I think even with social media and what we consume with the content and stuff like that, there's a certain etiquette that goes with that as well. Especially, we live in a society where clickbait is a thing, where a company or a news media outlet would put a title on something, so that people would engage with it. But then you go into it's that's not even what this article is about. But they want the engagement, they want the click, they want the the hits on whatever the article, the video, or the picture was about. And that's how you get caught a lot, because people tend to be intrigued about certain trigger words that tickle their fancy.
Yeah. and it's funny because so many different types of people listen, right? And it's not until people tell you or reach out to you or will comment or will message you that you kind of see man, a lot of people are listening. You once said that your barber right even mentioned it to you one time.
Yes, that's true.
And I have been in places where it's oh yeah, and your podcast and this, that, and the other. And I know people at certain people's jobs, listen. And then for instance, my mom, obviously number one supporter, right, will go and tell her coworkers at her job, about my son's podcast, or whatever. So now they go and then they tell their kids. So now it's almost they're teenagers, their kids in their 20s are now listening to the podcast, and then they'll comment on something to their parents. Their parents will come and tell my mom at work, and then my mom will be like, oh yeah, my coworker's daughter said that she listened to this, that, and other thing. You know, so you actually don't really know who's listening, right? A lot of times until it hits home and people actually tell you, man, I listened to this episode and I loved what you said and it encouraged me. And, you know, we see the comments that will be on our reel sometimes on people saying like, wow, like you really, you know, expressed this well, or this is good. I agree. I felt the same way. And I think that's one of the cool things, you know, one of the reasons why I listen to podcasts, right, or listen to other podcasts or speakers is because I feel like there are times or moments in life where you may not have words for something. You know what I mean? Like you may struggle with giving language to a feeling or to an experience or to a season in your life or to a concept. And then listening to somebody else, listening to another podcast or listening to a speaker talk about, you know, that same topic or feeling, it almost like they give a language that you're like, that's what I feel, or that's what it is. And, you know, it's a connection, right? And I feel like oftentimes we like to tackle topics that are sometimes controversial, topics that, you know, sometimes go against the norm or what everyone is kind of like agreeing with or talking about, or, you know, raised believing maybe the opposite, or that's not cool or that's not good as a Christian or whatever. And we like to talk about those things, and really, you know, they can be uncomfortable. They can be, you know, like I said, controversial, but that's what we like to tackle at times. But we'll see in the comments people saying like, you know, I agree, or, you know, I felt this before, or, you know, great job explaining that. Again, it's the idea of kind of giving language around certain topics that aren't necessarily talked about all the time. Yeah.
And I mean, we've seen that also a lot with people that we're actively having conversations with, even on the pod. You know, like last year we had many guests on the pod where sometimes in the middle of those conversations they'd be like, man, I didn't really think about it like that, or that's a really crazy question, or that's a this or that, you know. And it's because a lot of times, you know, with these conversations and with this engagement in these topics, and also the point of view and the perspective in which we bring, you know, it opens up like the floodgates in reference to those specific subjects, where then you can keep adding more, you can keep taking away more, you can keep, you know, it's like it opens up to different conversations which maybe aren't happening as often as they should be, and that's why you have that type of engagement. And I also think that the language in which we use to speak on these subjects is a lot more palatable for people, and what I mean by that is that, you know, we're not I think years ago, you know, we spoke about like Christianese and like certain like catchphrases and words and things that, you know, in our communities and in our, you know, Christian circles, like we get what that means, but that's not really how everyday people talk. And a lot of people are actually turned off by those phrases and those, you know, those lingos. And when we speak about stuff in a way that is raw, but is also giving reverence, because at the end of the day, you know, we have reverence for God, so we're not going to be dragging God, or we're not going to be dragging the churches and stuff like that, but we will speak truthfully on certain things that maybe need to be fixed, or certain experiences in which we've had. It's a lot more relatable to people. You know, we're not here giving this falsehood about how church people are perfect. We're not here giving a falsehood about when you serve God, it's easy. You know, we're not here speaking about all these, you know, perceptions that the world maybe has about us, because, you know, some people unfortunately have given off that perception. So when you're speaking to people that have gone through hardships, but believe in a God, but find it difficult to follow him because of circumstances and situations, and we're speaking on each and every one of those things about how we are actively working through those, you know, scenarios, it's a lot, you know, people engage with that and it resonates with them, because it's kind of like, man, I've been there, or I'm currently in that situation as well.
Yeah, and one thing I love about our podcast is that we, like you said, have done this since day one, right? Way back, we had episodes on like the Christianese, the Christian lingo. And from day one, I think it was clear that we were going to be authentic and honest about these type of topics and everything that we would cover or talk about. You know, if you're listening and haven't seen or heard all those episodes, you know, go back on Apple or Spotify to, you know, scroll all the way to the bottom. You'll see like the very first episode.
If you can find us on SoundCloud.
Yeah. I mean, that's where it was. And, you know, you'll see and hear that this has been us, right? We kind of always had that idea of we need to be real, you know? We're not going to, you know, be fake. We're not going to be so spiritual and so churchy, you know what I mean? And I think you know, we've done a lot of great episodes, but honestly, the last 2 episodes ago, The Skeptic's Guide to Churching, to me, I think that was a very powerful episode because it touched on being skeptical and doubting, but also the idea that we all will go through that season. And we will all doubt God. We will doubt the effectiveness of our church. We will doubt ourselves. We will doubt other people. And that's inevitable. You know what I mean? But to now get to a place where you admit, man, I'm in a season where I'm doubting God. I'm not believing as strong as I did before. That takes boldness to do, you know what I mean?
Courage.
And takes courage and all of those things. And believe you me, we may not always say, right, like, oh, this is something we experienced, right? But you know when someone is talking, you know from the way their tone is or their passion or just how on point they are with certain things. You can tell when, you know what, they've experienced that at one point. So with a lot of these topics, if we're not saying like, yeah, we've experienced it, that doesn't necessarily mean we haven't ever felt that way, you know, because you can definitely tell in how we're describing it or how we talk about it that we've been there, that we're maybe going through it. You know what I mean? So I think it's always important to like reiterate that the idea, like you said, when we speak about certain things, we're not speaking from a place of mastery or a place of accomplishment. It's speaking from a place of growth or a place of, you know, learning, right? And evolving and growing. And, you know,
while still currently doing each and every one of those things, while still learning, while still growing, while still evolving, while still, you know, acquiring new skill sets and tools, both physically and spiritually, emotionally and mentally. You know, it's kind of like this is an ongoing process where at the end of the day, you can have spent your whole life in church. It's not like, oh, at 40, you're good. You've accomplished it. It doesn't work that way.
And also how some people will wait till they feel they've accomplished or grown and reached all these different levels and different accomplishments and milestones, when in reality you will always be trying to achieve something else. And there'll always be something bigger and better to go for and something else you feel like you lack that you need.
And I think that, you know, specifically speaking about that subject about skepticism in the church and stuff like that, you know, sometimes even people, when they view our podcast or other people's podcasts or listen to certain things, they have skepticism within themselves as well, because they will sit there and look at us, for example, speak on a subject like that and feel a certain type of way about it. Like, oh, they think they got it together, or look at them saying this. But, you know, and it's kind of like you need to remedy that within yourself, because if we're here trying to give people a leg up or trying to give people an advice or trying to let people understand you're not alone, you know, you're not the only one that's going through this. These feelings, these emotions, these processes are normal. All of us are going through this. And what you're taking away from that is that you want to sit there and look at people and be skeptical about them. I think that that's some internal, you know, discovery you need to do within yourself, because you shouldn't be like that. You shouldn't be looking at people who are trying, who are, you know, really looking to, you know, do things for themselves, but also do things for others, because that's kind of like part of what we're supposed to be doing. At the end of the day, you know, as a church, we're not supposed to be sitting in the four walls just consuming everything and taking everything in for ourselves. We're supposed to be sharing that with the world. So when you have two individuals who are sitting here trying to share that with the world, you know, the gospel, God, his love, his mercy, his peace, his restorative powers and all that other stuff, but that's not what your takeaway is, then it's kind of like, okay, you need a little bit more help. And what we can provide you. So call this number now that's blinking at the imagine that's a therapy line and stuff.
But I think you know, and specifically with that episode, you received a comment, right, about it and someone's thoughts on it. And it's interesting because then those are the comments and then those are the thoughts and those are the words, right, that remind you of the importance of what you do and why you do it, right? And it solidifies, right, that you're doing something right. You know what I mean? And that there will always be those who will not like it. There will always be those that, may have a problem with it, or those that may not vibe with it, or those that may think that we come off a certain way, or that, whatever it is, right? But you will always have those individuals who listen, who need it, who listen and engage, and they'll say something and it's like, you know what, sir or ma'am, you know what I mean? That is exactly why we do what we do, you know?
Yeah, it's, just to give a little background, at 34 years old, I'm kind of making a shift in something. And y'all can wait for that.
Yeah.
Y'all can wait. I'm not going to go into all the details or whatever. But that
I was going to say that this is a good, this could be its own episode.
It could be its own episode. That's true. But this shift has put me in a position to be around a whole bunch of random people I don't know.
This is good because people are going to be thinking like, what is the shift he's talking about?
And it's people from all over the world.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like you have to like introduce yourself to certain people, and you have to hold conversations and all that other stuff. So, like usually like you speak about like what you do professionally, you speak about what you do in your life, you speak about your family, your hobbies and stuff like that. In one of those conversations, the podcast came up, which was a really cool topic because there was a couple of other people there that are also in the social media world and, are doing certain things, whether it's on YouTube, on Instagram, whatever platforms they use. But we spoke about the podcast. They were really excited about it. They all said, we all added each other and was like, oh, you check on my stuff, I'll check out your stuff, like all that, other things or whatever. And then I got one of those people that were part of that conversation checked out our podcast and sent me a message. So they said, hi, Eddie, obviously. I wanted to stop by and say that I subscribed to your podcast and heard the episode named The Skeptic's Guide to Churching. I really like the way that you and Miguel spoke. I felt an unreligious approach, but more of a relatable human-like approach. I love it. Please continue. So that's interesting. We'll dissect that in a minute. Then I responded to him and I said, good morning. Thanks for checking out the pod and subscribing. I'll be sure to let Miguel know too. At the end of the day, we think it's important to speak about the human experience of people who are in need to connect spiritually, but have to deal with the messiness that people bring with their humanness. Hope that made sense. He left me on red. No, I'm just playing. He went ahead and replied, yes, it makes total sense. You guys are talking about the truth that could happen in a congregation or with religion in general. There's always pros and cons to everything, and I think it's important to talk about it. I am sure it makes people feel normal and could encourage them to resonate and feel less alone about topics that church members don't talk about. I really resonated with you guys, and I'm sure others are as well. And this is coming from someone who does not identify as a Christian per se. They identify themselves as someone who's on a spiritual journey. So, thoughts?
I think, like I said, hearing that when you told me about it, I think it's very encouraging. You know what I mean? I've always been the person in anything I do besides the podcast in years prior, whether I was doing poetry or whatever, or when we would go out with How and travel and do all those things. Although we were going to different churches and although there was a lot of ministry happening within churches, I always found that even in those churches or congregations, there would be people that I would meet that were in the church, but they were like skeptical, you know what I mean? Like they were in the church, but they were like not really, and they would come and they would be like, I don't know about this. And somehow, something we said or how we carried ourselves or what we, did would minister to these people. And they would be like, man, like I've seen a lot of groups, or I've seen a lot of people do this, or I've heard this before, but this was a little different. This was, and it has nothing to do with us, right? Or me or whatever, but it's the idea of, there are certain things that a certain group of people, right, really gravitate to. There's a certain type of authenticity, a certain type of honesty, a certain type of relatability that I believe certain individuals are blessed with, that other people recognize that and gravitate towards that. So we could easily be a podcast that will sit here and just go through, Genesis to Revelation, chapter by chapter, and just talk about the Bible and study it. We do that on Sundays for Sunday school. You know what I mean? So we get
if
that.
They don't know, we're Sunday school teachers.
Right.
So.
And, so we do that already, and it's almost like on this platform, even before we did that, right, with the Sunday school stuff, we still carried ourselves in that way where it's like, you know, we just want to talk about the real stuff that people are thinking that they probably aren't saying or being spoken to about or being taught about. You know what I mean? And we can reach all our brothers and sisters in Christ in the four walls of the church. We can be real Pentecostal, and we can do real all of that.
Non-denominational too. It depends.
Right? And we will get views, and hits, and we will get people because people love all that. You know what I mean? But that's not what we chose to do, and that's not what we like to do, enjoy doing, right? And at least personally speaking, that's not what I feel like is my strong suit in connecting with certain individuals. You know
and
what
I think there's a time. Sorry to cut you off. I think there's also a time and a place for everything. You know, because if I need to go do a lap, trust and believe, I'll be running a marathon. Like, that's not something that And
he's talking about running a lap around the church.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Oh, well, if you don't know what I mean, that's what I mean. Like, that's not, you know, I grew up super Pentecostal. That's like my upbringing in church and stuff like that or whatever. You know, all things aside about what people can say about it, at the end of the day, you know, you just learn certain things that is just that's how you connected with God. So at the end of the day, you know, that's not a part of me that I'm ashamed of. You know, that's not a part of me that I feel vergüenza to talk about. And that's not a part of me that I don't feel comfortable sharing about myself. Because like I said, at the end of the day, if I need to do 3 laps, I will be running there with everybody else that be running or whoever. And even if nobody else is running, I'll be there too.
Which is a very interesting conversation and topic that we should talk about, because there are many people who may grow up in Pentecostal settings and upbringings, and then they decide not to anymore and kind of leave that, and then they go into something a little more freeing, right? A lot of people use the word liberal, right? That's the word that
you're talking about like the group.
And then they will start bashing the Pentecostal, like, you know, what they grew up in, which that's not cool either. But we're going to save that. That's a very good conversation to have.
Make sure you're writing all this in the comments so it reminds us to go back and to do all this. But I say that because, you know, then somebody can interpret like what you said before to be like, oh, it's because they're ashamed of their roots or they're ashamed of their upbringing, stuff like that. And it's like, we're not, you know, but like you said, we're making a choice to communicate via like this, you know, just sitting down, being authentic, being raw, sometimes being a little too honest about certain things, you know, and just speaking about it like culturally, how we feel the most comfortable speaking and addressing these issues, you know, so it's not a thing where it's like, oh, we're making a conscious decision because we're trying to hide an aspect or part of us from what we were growing up with. It's just that's not the avenue in which we're choosing at the moment.
And I love how he said, and you have it there, the unreligious approach, right? Can you read that sentence in the first?
He said, I really like the way you, Miguel, spoke. I felt an unreligious approach, but more of a relatable, human-like approach.
And that's powerful because, you know, with the individual saying this, right, they're using terminology that they're used to, accustomed to, what they know, right? So the unreligious approach, right, but less of an unreligious approach and more of a what? A human approach, right? And relatability, that's what he's speaking about. The unreligious approach, I'm assuming that he's speaking about is the fact that we didn't go on there and start, you know, telling the people who were doubting that they were wrong, you know, that they need to enter a 21-day fast, right? We didn't tell them what, you know, how dare you, you know, act that way. Don't you know what Colossians 2:17 says? We didn't do that, you know. And that is the religious approach, you know what I mean? Which that's a terminology being used, right? We can say as being churchy. We can call that being super spiritual.
Which I think that for the outside world, what it comes off is that approach comes off cold. And it comes off in a way that is unapproachable.
Right.
Sometimes people feel judged.
Right.
Because they feel that when you get too religious-y on them, you're not giving them an opportunity to feel seen or to feel like this is normal.
And that's not just people out there. That's people in here.
Oh, no, yes, absolutely.
Too,
people in church.
You know?
Yes.
That even individuals who speak this way
Yes.
normally, you know what I mean,
Mm-hmm.
will feel some type of way, because again, we are human.
Yeah.
And there is a human experience that we are having as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that right there is very encouraging, because it lets you know we're not only reaching those individuals who have the knowledge and context of God, Jesus, church, you know, being a believer, but also those individuals who may not have that context, but we were able to connect with them on the level of being a human.
Yeah.
You know, and we don't ever want to be so spiritual, right, that we cannot connect with individuals on an every day-to-day level, right? If I can't connect with, you know, my barber, or I can't carry a conversation with someone, you know, that I'm waiting in line next to, or whatever, you know what I mean, without just like, you know, did you know that if you don't repent and ask God for forgiveness, like, do you know, like, all those things, and I just can't carry a conversation about that person's day and how they're doing, and you know, all of those things, it's like you lack that relatability and that humanity.
Yeah.
You know, so with that episode, I think, and it's funny because when we're doing the episode, I don't think we're even thinking consciously like, okay, be human. Like, it's just, that's how it is. That's how we are.
Yes.
That's how we talk.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But then this is what happens. This is the impact that it has.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, at the end of the day, you know what, we set a goal for ourselves in the very beginning of this, which was that we wanted to hit a demographic of people that were within our age group, you know, that kind of were into the certain things that we were into as well, but that didn't limit it to having to be only church folk. Yeah. And not one time ever was it like we're strictly going for the people that believe in Jesus. It was never that. You know, there's an age group. There's culturally a group of people that maybe will relate with a lot of things that we speak about or whatever. But at the end of the day, this is open to anybody that can relate, that something resonates with them, that something, you know, is an experience that they've had. Because I think that regardless of the level of strictness or how conservative you grew up or whatever, you know, because somebody always has a grandmother who was either super mega Catholic or super mega Pentecostal or super mega Baptist, Methodist, Seventh-day Adventist, Episcopalian. Like there's somebody in your family that was whatever, like really super whatever, and you may have an experience with that, some good, some bad or whatever, but then it's also like maybe you don't have people that you have those type of conversations with, you know, and it's kind of like we're kind of here to just talk about everything. So that's why we'll have episodes like we had, which is, you know, we're speaking about the Skeptic's Guide to Churching, but then we'll have an episode on things you don't know about us, or we'll have an episode on, you know, random things about stuff that, you know, we've spoken about mental health, we've spoken about music, we're spoken about literature, we've spoken about the arts, we've spoken about, you know, masculinity. We've been through the years hitting a lot of topics that aren't strictly just churchy, but in each and every one of those conversations that we have, God, the subject of God is always present. Right. The idea of God, the principles of God, and, you know, a life that you're supposed to be living in order, you know, to try to be as Christ-like as possible is always intertwined in the conversations that we have.
Yeah, and it's funny because I've heard one time someone say they call it sneaky Jesus, right? Mm-hmm. And they say they'll do certain things, right, where it's super obvious that this book is for Christians and believers, and you're going to get, you know, all the God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, all of that in this book. Yeah. But then there's another book that I'm writing or working on that by the title, by the subtitle and the tagline and everything, you can't even tell that this is a Christian book, right? But it is, you know, and once you start reading and you start seeing the references, and once you start reading and you start seeing like, you know, wait a minute, this author is actually like, you know, like they've been through a lot, and what's keeping them going? They're saying it's their faith. And then in a few chapters later, you see that, you know, they prayed about something, and then you see in a few, you know, so that author, you know, podcaster, whatever, you know, they do a lot, you know, he was saying that it's what he calls sneaky Jesus. And it's not like he's hiding Jesus or hiding his faith, but there are certain moments where he is intentional about, I'm doing this project and whatever it is, I'm not going to announce, right, and put on the front cover the cross, the grave, and all these different things. But when people read this book, Jesus is all over it. You know, he is all over this story. He is all over these words. He is all over these experiences. And sometimes, you know, we may have individuals who have problems with that, right? Like Christians who may think that everything you put out, everything you talk about Jesus needs to be out there. God needs to be out there, needs to be in everything that you say. And if you're doing a song review and you're not mentioning, the theological interpretation of that, a theological application to that, it doesn't count, right? And it's like, it may not necessarily be so forward in the message and the art and the content, right? But sometimes it's there, you know what I mean? And we're actually doing a song review and reaction to Blanca's video, right? And that'll be out. But I believe that song, I listened to the song, and I believe that song is one of those songs where it's like a sneaky Jesus song. You know what I mean? It's true. It's not it's a new day because Jesus saved me and forgave me of my sins, but you may gravitate towards that song and feel encouraged and empowered that it's a new day, it's a new beginning. I can have a great day today and all these things. And then start questioning, but why? Like all this stuff, and see like in the lyrics of what she's saying, these things can't come from a human, a man, a woman. This is coming from something higher, better. Yeah. You know what I mean? And you just never know who you can reach, you know what I mean, in those moments and when you do those things. In the second comment that he sent, he said about people feeling less alone. You know what I mean? Can you read that?
He said, I am sure it makes people feel normal and could encourage them to resonate and feel less alone about topics that church members don't talk about.
Yeah. The idea of people feeling normal or less alone, like if we're going to be honest, you know what? For years growing up, there were things that I felt, regarding church or regarding God or, Christianity that I kept to myself and didn't know how to process because nobody was talking about those things or nobody was addressing those things. You know what I mean? It's like, we do this now when there are a lot of different people and platforms that do similar things and will break down topics, and there's a lot of more availability now and exposure to these things. But the idea of growing up and feeling like you have all these different thoughts or feelings or emotions about certain topics within church and spirituality and Christianity and all these things, and you feeling like nobody else thinks that, or nobody else is on that wave, or nobody else agrees, or whatever, you feel like you're not normal, and That's true. Feel like you're alone in your thinking. So even that comment was very important. The idea of feeling less alone.
I think, full transparency, we still feel like that in 2022, where there's a lot of moments and a lot of scenarios and a lot of situations in which I will find myself and be like, am I the only one that thinks this? Am I the only one that feels this way? Am I the only one X, Y, and Z? Because it, from the outside in, it looks like nobody else is on the wavelength. Nobody else is catching that vibe. Nobody else is seeing that certain things may not be being the best that they can be or whatever, and that things need to like be switched up and all that other stuff. Or nobody sees anything wrong with certain things that are happening or being said or being done. And it's kind of like you still would feel like that way. At 34 years old, I still have moments like that where I still feel alone. I still feel like the weirdo. I still feel like this is crazy. Like, why am I feeling this, but nobody else is catching on that as well? So when you have opportunities to speak on certain things, or when you have opportunities to listen to other people speak on things, and it's kind of like, oh, thank God I'm not the only one, that has thought that, or I'm not the only one that has felt those things, and I'm not the only one that's going through that certain situation. It helps you keep going, really. At the end of the day, at its most basic, it gives you a little pep in your step to be able to be like, all right, I am not going crazy, because I think that there's a lot of battles and a lot of conversations that us people in general have, everybody and their mother, but us as believers have like a double talk, because of the fact that, like I always say, we operate on two realms. We're here on the physical realm, but we also operate in the spiritual. So you have things that are stressing you out, for example, in the physical world, but then you also understand there's a spiritual side attached to that. So then when things are going wrong here, and then you see that they're going wrong there, and so it's like you keep getting like you're in this cycle of like certain things that are just like driving you insane, because either like the secret battles and the secret conversations that you have. So when you come across someone who is speaking on these things, or you come across, it could be a song, it could be a book, it could be a podcast, it could be a conversation where other people relate on that and other people express their experiences with that, it just helps you feel like I am not alone.
Yeah, so to all of you listening, we hope that that's what you are feeling, less alone, that, you know, there may be a topic that you completely agree with us on. Then there may be thoughts that you're like, oh, I disagree. And that's okay. That's a part of being human. You know what I mean? So definitely we appreciate the support and share the episodes. If you feel like there are people in your life that you listen to an episode and you're like, man, like they'll really benefit from listening to this or these thoughts or these ideas because of the way we break it down or because of the way we're presenting it, then do so. You know what I mean?
And if you're checking out our reels and that's how you are connected with us, thank you. Always like, share it.
Yeah.
You know, follow us on our social medias. But be sure to listen to the full episode as well. I think it's important because there's a lot of times that we kind of like take a turn and we start talking about something else that's very important that maybe isn't specific to that subject. So there's a lot of different like good things that you can take from there, some funny, some interesting as well. So be sure to just check out the whole episode and, you know, keep joining us on the journey.
So definitely stay tuned, you know, for our future episodes. Make sure to subscribe so you can be notified every time we drop a new episode. And thank you so much for joining us today.
So like always, you can find us on our social medias, on our Instagram, our Facebook.
At God Life Culture. We are there. We are on YouTube, God Life Culture Podcast. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Check out the visuals there. And, you know, we have different videos. We have a vlog that's up there, reaction videos. So check those out as well.
So thank you for tuning into the latest episode of the God Life Culture Podcast. That's God Life Culture. Until next time.
See ya.
Bye.